and satisfied subscribers. With us here today, we have Patrick Moreno, our Product Marketing Manager. And just before we start, I would like to point out the Q&A chat field, or if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A chat field or the chat field itself, and Patrick and I will be monitoring these questions and answering them at the end of the webinar. Also, this webinar will be recorded for your future needs. And that being said, I will now hand it over to Patrick.
Thank you, Wesley, for that introduction, and thanks everybody for taking your time and interest with Zyxel and attending this Wi-Fi webinar with Zyxel. So this is kind of part 2 of what we did last month. This is Wi-Fi, some best practices, deployments, and help to satisfy your subscribers. So I'm your presenter, Patrick Moreno, the Product Marketing Manager for Zyxel Communications, North America. So what we'll discuss today is Wi-Fi configuration. We'll talk about security. We'll also talk about the advanced features related to the guest networks and the hidden networks, as well as MAC filtering. We'll talk about Wi-Fi protected setup, WPS, Wi-Fi scheduling, the status, the Wi-Fi channels, some troubleshooting, as well as adding an extender. So for your settings that are in our gateways, whether that's an Ethernet gateway or a DSLCP, they're very similar. We both support a dual band environment, which is the 5 gig and the 2.4. In the 2.4, the basic setup, by default, it'll be enabled, so the Wi-Fi will be operating when you plug this product in. We'll also have a default SSID. That'll be the Zyxel default. That can be changed during your evaluation process. You may decide to have your own SSID, and that's fine, and that can be encoded into the configuration. There's also an option for hiding the SSID, which we'll talk about. In certain instances, that may be required for specific applications, as well as the channel selection. By default, it's already enabled by an automatic channel, which it scans and looks usually at 1, 6, or 11. You can take that check mark off and manually select the channel. So here in the 2.4, we have the range from 1 to 11. 1, 6, and 11 are the primaries that you want to use, and they're automatically used when it's in the auto channel selection. You can use an overlapping channel, but in some cases, it may help or hinder the wireless environment. So using those overlapping channels could cause some interference. We also have the channel width. By default, it's in the auto mode, which supports 20 megahertz and 40 megahertz. So this gives you that performance level. So at 20 megahertz, you'll see, roughly between 20 to 60 megabits, depending on your wireless client device. When you double that and use the 40, then that improves the performance, but you may run into some interference with other devices in the area because it's bonding channels together to be able to accommodate for higher throughput. So by default, we use an auto mode, and that allows the gateway to broadcast this. And depending on the client, some clients may only operate in 20, others will operate in 20 or 40 only, and it can accommodate those wireless clients. Then in the 802.11 mode here, you would select the operating mode that you want the gateway to perform and broadcast. By default, it's usually set in our industry to a B, G, and N, and that's just to accommodate all the wireless devices that are out there. Some cases we'll need to change that to improve or enhance the wireless environment. On a 5 gig configuration, pretty similar. By default, it is enabled, and it does have a default SSID. Again, if that configuration is changed by you doing your evaluation of the product, you can have your own customized SSID. You have the hide SSID option as well. And then we go into the channels. Here, the channels the operation is very similar. There's an auto channel scan mode that selects the best channel. And in the event that you're running into some issues with the wireless and you want to manually select, you can select from the range here. Usually in the 5 gig space, there's not that many competing signals, so you're not going to have much interference, if that, if any, that you would compared to a 2.4. Then in the channel width here, again, the similar format, except we have another option, the 80 megahertz. Because this is a 5 gig in the AC, it does accommodate more of a bond with those channels, so you can double or triple the amount using the 40 and 40 to make 80, and depending on the wireless device, the AC client, if it does support that or not. So by default, it's no auto mode 20, 40, or 80, and you can specify a specific frequency if you want. Then in the 802.11 mode, again, it's set to an auto mode, which is A, AN, and AC. And again, you can change those according to what you want to do in your wireless environment for the 5 gig. So for wireless security, really, it's never a good idea to leave your wireless open. You know, that's the easiest way for anybody to intrude or hack into your network. If it's open, they can utilize that, launch attacks against you or other people using your Wi-Fi. So you would never really leave your home door open. So why would you leave your Wi-Fi open? So you want to secure that. So the encryption methods, these are the industry standards that we're utilizing, WPA2, WPA, and the web. So WPA2 is the most strongest form right now. There is a new standard coming out, but that will be really ratified towards the end of the year, which is the WPA3. So when we get closer to that, we'll talk more about what that is. So here you have WPA2, PSK. Then for your older or legacy Wi-Fi products, we have the WPA, and this will help support those devices that only go up to this level. And for real legacy products, then we have the WEP, the WEP. And again, this is really not widely used anymore. It is a fixed setting, and it is vulnerable to attack. So, you know, in the worst case, though, some type of encryption is better than no encryption for your Wi-Fi. So on the back of the device, you're going to look, it usually has a default pre-configured wireless settings and security setup already in the device itself. Unless you go through the event of the evaluation and you specify a different SSID and passphrase or password, then that can be applied. But in this case, you'll look in the back and it already has it there. The pre-shared key, you'll see, you can actually scan that with your mobile device and get the passphrase or the password to be applied into when you're connecting to the network. Setting up the WPA, PSK. So by default, it already has that as the highest level setup by default. But if it wasn't, you can select the security mode and select from the drop-down list what type of level you want to take a look at and utilize. So once that is selected, WPA2, PSK, then we have some options. You're going to be joining that wireless client to the gateway and pass the wireless settings and security across. There's an option here called Protected Mode Management Frame, or known as 802.11w. It's basically a management frame that helps with communication control with the devices, the client device to the gateway or the AP, whatever it may be. There's nothing really in there, but it can be susceptible to attacks by hijacking those packets and jumping into a network. And you don't really see this in any subscriber home environment. Really, mainly, this would be an enterprise. The reason why it's here is more likely part of the wireless chipset, so it has an option to select that. You can still use our gateways, whether it's DSL or Ethernet, in an office or business environment. But for typically home users, you're really not going to really need to select that option. You can, it's not going to affect anything. There's another option, WPA PSK compatible. This allows for legacy devices in your network. So you can still use WPA2, the PSK option, And if you have other legacy devices, older device, you can support them with this WPA PSK compatibility option. Then the generated password automatically, this option generates a password from the gateway itself and provides you with a key. So the key that you see in the back label of the device, you can use that and it'll generate that for all the devices that are going to connect. Now, if you uncheck that, then that means you're going to specify your own pre-shared key, and you can put it in any fashion. When you put that pre-shared key in, it can be contain letters and numbers and even special characters now. In the past, we never really supported that, but now we do, since there's a big demand to put some of those characters in there. So you can create your own password. When you're doing an evaluation, you can have that password created and put into the devices. So when it ships, with that configuration, it'll have those settings already there. The group key time update timer is basically allows that key, before it changes to another set, it gives you a specific amount of time in seconds. So 3,600 seconds, which is about an hour or so. And so after every hour, it's going to exchange the keys and make a difference. So it's very hard for someone intruding or hacking your wireless network to get in because of this key exchange. So with the WPA2 enterprise configuration, mainly for business, we're not really going to see this type of setup because it does require some extra equipment to manage the access and security. So in this environment, from the client, it's going to connect to the gateway. From the gateway, it makes its request, and then from there, we're utilizing a radius server to do the authentication. So it's going to pass that through from the gateway, and it's going to go look for that radius server by its IP address and the service port. Once it identifies that, then it's going to allow it to authenticate the user and allow access in or deny access. So for that configuration, it looks pretty similar, but there's some extra options. Besides the security mode, we select the protected management frame and the compatibility. We have the timer as well. We also have a pairwise master key. So this is basically assuring that both stations will, once they make a successful connection with the passphrase, they're going to acknowledge that and register that as part of the authentication. The pre-authentication option, that's another option. It'll put a timestamp so it knows what's going on and tracks that password for the subscriber. The authentication server for the IP address of that radius server, that's going to be used to identify that device out there that's going to hold the information for the authentication, as well as the service port. And then it has a shared secret passphrase and then a timeout setting. For WPA, for those legacy devices, you have this similar setup, just a few less options. You know, we'll have the security mode, the group time, the IP address for the authentication radius server, the service port, that pre-shared key that we're using, the secret key, and then the timeout settings. For really old legacy products, maybe you have an old printer or some other device that doesn't have those higher levels of WPA. You can use WAP. It's better than no security, but it's a static settings. Once you set it, it's always there. It never changes like WPA and WPA2, and it's susceptible to some attacks. But once you set it, you have your passphrase. You have two levels of settings. With the passphrase, you can generate one automatically, or you can just put in your own key. So up to 5 ASCII characters for 10 hexadecimal, 13 ASCII if you use the 128-bit, and 26 characters across, or hexadecimal characters, sorry. Oops, there we go. All right, so now we go into the advanced settings of the Wi-Fi. In the old days, we used to use these quite a bit. It's just like a radio station. You're fine-tuning, you're trying to get dialed into that one radio station. Same thing with Wi-Fi. You have a lot of extra settings to customize and dial in the wireless environment. However, these days, the Wi-Fi has been working pretty good, so the vendors of the chipsets have scaled back on the visibility of the Wi-Fi settings that are available, the advanced settings, and we don't see as much as we do, but we do have some that can help in some instances when we deploy Wi-Fi. So under the Advanced tab, you have your wireless advanced settings options, and we'll take a look at these. The request to send, clear to send option is basically controlling the wireless clients and allowing them to each communicate from the client side to the gateway and not being bombarded with all kinds of wireless devices trying to talk at the same time. And then if you have outside influences, outside wireless signals or transmissions that can also interfere with your wireless environment, it helps reduce that and put everything in order. The fragmentation threshold is the ability to reduce the size of packets that are being transmitted. So in some cases with really large files, they would send them across and it may take up all the bandwidth or the airtime used to transmit, or you may have some issues where you have to retransmit over and over again. So it's not really fair for others. So you can actually break that up into smaller chunks, as you see down below, and it allows for the transmissions to go through much easier. Intra-SSID blocking is the ability to keep wireless clients contained in their own little private wireless network without seeing other devices in the network. So just like you would if you're traveling, you're in an airport or in a hotel, you can't see the hotel network or any adjacent computers around there, but they're there. And it puts you in this sort of private internet or Wi-Fi. This is really good when we get into the guest networking, because here you want to be able to contain and keep people, certain wireless devices, away from others. The transmit power is the output power of the gateway. By default, it's always set to 100, and it's pretty good for most deployments, but in some cases where there's a lot of concentration of Wi-Fi in a certain area, you may want to reduce that. And in some cases, by reducing the power helps work better and be a good Wi-Fi neighbor, especially in a high density area like a multi-dwelling apartments complex. You will see a lot of Wi-Fi signals in a small area. By reducing the wireless output would help and not overpower and cause problems for other wireless devices. So wireless quality, the quality of service. Wireless multimedia is an option. It's a 802.11e standard. It's for the giving priority for wireless devices or the wireless networks. It's kind of a generic standard for traffic, so it categorizes voice and video, best effort, and background into one. So not knowing exactly what application you're running, it gives those wireless clients some priority over the others. Those options are built into the product and usually enabled by default, so there's not really a chance to disable that. You can do that in command line behind the scenes in the gateway if you really need to disable that. For guest networks, we have our own network, the original network that comes with the device, and there could be two because you have a 2.4 and 5 gig. But then you may want to have a guest network at the same time. And you want to exclude certain of those guest networks from going into your private network. So in the settings, you can have up to 8 wireless networks per single gateway. So either it's a AP, could be an Ethernet router, or DSL CPE in a dual band environment. So one is already set up for the normal public Wi-Fi access, and then you have 3 additional ones that you can configure. They have a default Zyzel name, and then you can change those, whatever you want to do and make a unique thing. You enable the option by setting the active then you can change that SSID from the default. We can hide it. We can do the intra-SSID blocking and provide WMM, the wireless multimedia QoS. And then below, you can set individual wireless security settings for each of those. So each one of those SSIDs, we'll just say this is 2.4, can have a different level of wireless security applied to it with different settings. So each one of those, even though it's from one device, one gateway, it can be individual for different wireless networks. So setting up the guest networks and utilizing the MultiPro mobile app, very simple to do. From the main menu, you click on wireless guest wireless networks, and then you go through the process to set it up, and it'll guide you through that setup. You click on start. It'll search and prepare to make that guest network. Once it does, you'll have an option like this in the middle. It says guest devices, and that's the guest network, and whoever's connected there, you'll have visibility into those devices on that guest network. Then from the guest network, in the settings itself, you can go into that network. You can see the information about it. You can see the passphrase and the SSID. And for those who want to connect to it, you can provide them with a QR code. They can scan themselves and connect to it. Hidden SSIDs, we talked about this earlier, is an option in the wireless settings. What that does, it gives you the ability to hide the SSID from broadcasting. So it's still there, but most of the normal subscribers won't be able to see it. So you select that option, put the check mark on. So when the subscriber goes to see the wireless environment and connects to a wireless network, they'll see maybe the 2.4 to 5 gig, and that's all they're going to see. Underlying, you'll see that there is a hidden network on the 5 gig, but that subscriber or client device won't see it. Only in the event that you have special software or some diagnostic tools that you can utilize, like a Wi-Fi analyzer, then it can show you all the wires. As you can see in this illustration here, we see the 2.4 and the 5 gig, as well as the hidden 5 gig network. So in Windows 10, to connect to a hidden network, we'll use this as an example. You go to Wi-Fi settings, and you'll go to an option called Manage Known Networks, right? Once you go in there, then you can add a wireless network. So add a new network. Then we will go to add a network, and you type in the network name. So you're going to need to know what that is. And if you don't, you need to go to your gateway and take a look at that. Once that's set up, then you can access it. So type in that name in the space provided. Then there's a level of security applied to it, then you want to go ahead. So there's open, but more likely we're using WPA2. We'll select that option. And now you can join that hidden network. So MAC filtering is another option to allow or deny access. All wireless devices are like Ethernet, right? And they all support a MAC address, the hard-coded serial number that identifies the product and the manufacturer. So you can get that information, going to the command prompt. It's usually on the back or bottom of the device, somewhere on the label. And once you have that MAC address, just apply it to the table. And in the entry, you usually have about 32 entries. You can specify allow or deny access, depending on what you want to do. So in the table here, you can see we have up to 32 entries here, and we can select, if we have more than one SSID, like a guest network, you can select it from the drop-down list. Then in the MAC filtering, you enable or disable that option, and then you can allow or deny through the filters action. And then add those clients via the MAC address to the table. So Wi-Fi protected setup. It's been around for a while, introduced in 2006, and it gives the ability to provide wireless security, set up a network very easily with just usually push a button or push of a software from the gateway to a client device. So from the gateway, we'll use this example here. We push that button for 2 seconds, only 2 seconds, that's all you need to do. Then it's going to give you about 2 minutes to go to your next device. And within that 2 minutes, this is AP here, we're going to press that WPS button again for 2 seconds. It's going to do that exchange that you see on the top there with security and set up a network automatically. And that's all you really need to do. To redo this again for another client device, all you do is go back to the gateway, press the button for 2 seconds, and then run over within 2 minutes to the other device and press that button for 2 seconds. And that's it. And you can set up as many devices in your home that you need to. You can also set up this option within the gateway. You can enable or disable. In some cases, which we'll talk about, some providers don't use WPS, or they find it, it causes some issues. So they disable it. It can also be configured default in the configuration to be disabled as well. And then you have an option to enable a PIN option where you punch in a number. Down below for the stations, you can go ahead and release the station identification and then start the whole process again, like from scratch. In the WPS option for the stations, here is where you can push the WPS, and then, or you have the option to provide a pre-configured PIN number that you want to use to be able to set that up from the WPS option. So the WPS button is also a multiple function button. And we know from the WPS option to set up Wi-Fi security, you do a short press, 2 seconds, and it's going to transmit the passphrase and set up the network. You press it longer than 2 seconds, like 3 seconds, it could shut off the Wi-Fi, completely shut it off, or enable it. Or I'm sorry, disable the WPS or enable the WPS option. Then if you press it longer than that, it can completely shut off the Wi-Fi. So this is why it runs into some issues with some providers, because their subscribers, anytime there's a button that they can push or something with a light, they're going to push it regardless. They don't even know what it is. They just do it. And in some cases, they'll disable the Wi-Fi or disable the WPS, and then they're calling back into the office. Unfortunately, we're in a tough spot because we want to follow the standards, but then we understand that you have issues. And to not offer WPS, then that may prevent us from selling products, because some people say, hey, we want WPS. So we do work with you in the configuration. If you feel like you just don't want to go down that route of WPS, we can take a look at options to disabling that completely through the configuration. But in other cases, some people think it's really good and they want to have it. So, what do you do? Other multifunctions can be configured with a WPS button. It can be set up for custom programmed to set up set-top boxes. So not affecting the wireless clients, it's only going to seek out those set-top boxes. And then when you press that for a couple seconds, it's going to go ahead and do the key exchange, and then you go run to the set-top box and you set that one up as well, their WPS, and it only sets up those devices for that session. There is some flaws that were discovered in 2011 with WPS and the PIN. So when you do the transmission and you send out the PIN codes, they can be intercepted through a brute force attack, and then that gives an intruder or hacker an opportunity to get in with your security because they intercepted the passcode. So there's been numerous patches updated through many vendors and manufacturers, but probably the best method would probably just disable the PIN option altogether and just go with the push button, because you physically have to push those buttons to activate the WPS. So it's more secure than, a random PIN code. So Wi-Fi scheduling. So most wireless devices will have some sort of scheduling options. It allows you to enable or disable Wi-Fi without actually being there inside. You don't even have to be home. It can be on or off automatically by setting the schedule. It looks very intimidating, but it's actually very simple to do. And we'll take a look at it. It allows you to set up time of day and specific hours of the day and half hours only. So the full hour or the half hour. So there's no 2:45 or 3:35. So you either got to select a whole hour or a half hour. To configure the settings for Wi-Fi scheduling, you enable the option. Then we enable the WLAN status, which means you're going to turn it on. Then you select when you want this to enforce during the day. So every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or maybe on the weekends only. We'll just say every day. And then put in your time. So from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., 5:30 actually, we're going to go ahead and enforce this policy for the Wi-Fi. So between those hours, it's going to be operating. And then that's it. And you apply the settings and you're done. Pretty simple. And then you can set different rules. With the monitoring of the Wi-Fi clients and the channel status. So here, we can take a look and see who's connected via the MAC address that shows who they are, when they associated, and their RSSI decibels. And then you have a little indicator off to the far left. It kind of gives you an idea of the signal strength, guesstimation. That's for the 2.4, and then that's for the 5 gig. So you have those two options. For the wireless status, the channels to see what's going on in your environment, then you don't have to whip out your Android and your analyzer. You can kind of look at it within the gateway itself. From the channel status, you go ahead and you click the scan option. It's going to scan, take about 15 seconds, and it's going to take a look at the results. Here's the 5 gig, 2.4, I'm sorry. We're on channel 3, and then there's all kinds of different interference here. You can see a lot of active Wi-Fi. And on the 5 gig, not so much. And then you can rerun the test again later. So adding an extender with the repeater, so you have your WAP 6804, our extender we're using this example. We're going to put it in repeater mode. And again, depending if it's an Ethernet gateway or DSL CPE, you can wirelessly repeat and let the WAP 6804 be an extender, a standalone station, and connect those wireless devices. You can manually log into the WAP 6804. There's a Zyxel setup for Windows and Zyxel setup.local for Macintosh, or want to get right into it, then you can connect to it via the AP mode, or you toggle the repeater or the client mode. As you can see, each of those have their own specific IP addresses to get into those interfaces to allow you to configure those settings for those modes. And once you access it by the password that's on the bottom of the device, the foot, and add that in there, and then type in the address to get to those pages. So here, the easy mode, you see the network map, all your connected devices. You can see that it's connected to a modem or a gateway, whatever it is, and it has internet access. Go to the expert mode, and we go into the configuration. We go into APs in the repeater option. Here, you can, from the station, you can go ahead and select the wireless encryption that you're using on the Ethernet gateway or DSL CPE. Here, you have an option for site survey, so all the wireless networks that are available, so hopefully there's not this many in a consumer's home, but they'll look for the Zyxel or the DSL CPE, whatever it is, and then once they find it, they highlight it, and then they type in the passphrase, whatever that passphrase is, if they're using the default or they're using something different. And that allows you to connect to it. Adding an extender with WPS, again, we just walked through that, so it's very simple. 2 seconds from the gateway, give you 2 minutes to walk over to the extender, press that WPS button, and does the key exchange. You can add an extender with the MultiPro app. So from the menu, you go ahead and select Add Extender. It's going to take you right through the process to add the extender. It's going to search for it. It's going to find it, and any devices that are connected to the Zyxel devices, you see that's where the extender is going to be. From the extender itself, you can see how many clients are connected. You can see the signal strength it has, and that orange ring indicates it's the extender. When you dive into the repeater, then you can see the IP address, the channel, how much bandwidth it's using, the max speed on the 5 gig for the bridge. And then you have some options to set up the device itself, where you're connected. You can disable the Wi-Fi. So when you're setting up the AP extender, you're looking at placement. Where do you do? It's pretty simple to do. You have the device itself, you plug it in, and it has an indicator on the front panel that allows you to set it up. So here's the front panel of the LAP 6804, and that third one down is the link status, or link quality, which we call it. And you look at that to determine where the best signal is. If it's too far away, you'll get some different color changes. So if it's green, you have a really good link. If it's amber, it's fair. You know, you're probably pushing the boundaries. And if it's red, then it's not having a good signal. So you got to move it closer. And that just gives you the idea. So when you're walking around the home and you're trying to get an idea where to place this, this will give you the idea without having to take out a third-party device like your Wi-Fi analyzer on your mobile phone and, you know, determine where the best place is for your extender. So what we discussed today, a whole bunch of items: the configuration, the security, advanced features, the guest networking, filtering, the Wi-Fi protected setup, the scheduling, the status, and adding an extender to your wireless environment. So come to the point where we have questions. Any questions out there? Let's see. Couple. Okay, so what do you think?
I have a question from Joe. He asked, what advice would you have when trying to set up proper residential and customer expectations regarding Wi-Fi speeds? If a FTTH deployment, fiber to the home, has hardwired 200 meg and using Wi-Fi device next to the Zyxel, what should they expect for throughput on 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz, assuming no disturbers in the way?
That's an excellent question. So the biggest challenge is education. And then this is a perfect example. So we have a wireless connection with 200 megs down and 50 up. And then we have our device, and then that feeds into our interfaces, which is the network LAN ports and our Wi-Fi interface, which is where we usually connect to. So those interfaces are different. They're going to have different speeds and abilities built into them. So WAN is one portion, but then when you go into the device, you go into the LAN, and the LAN is going to be treated differently. So with the wireless, you may have a great link, and you're looking down in your system tray where the clock is, and you see, you know, you have a good connection, and it could register 150, maybe 200, or over a gig in Wi-Fi, depending, you know, what band you're in. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the throughput is going to be, you know, 200 megabits, you know, to your device. Again, you got to know that there may be more connected devices on the Wi-Fi. So you may have 10 devices, 15 devices connected. That's going to, oops. Oh. So that means it could have more. Wait 1 second. There we go. There we go. So that means, you have some technical difficulty, sorry about that. So That means that that pipe is shared between all connected devices. So that 200 megabits down is going to be spread out between all those 15 users. And then when you go into the wireless environment, it's also going to be shared as well with all those devices. Plus, the overhead is going to be from the wireless security and the communications background. So real world, it may be a little bit slower. So the expectations, we have what we call the marketing side, and then we have what's in the real world, the technical, what we know, the nuts and bolts of the devices. So definitely there could be some differences between the actual hardware, what it can do. If we're using one of the Zyzol gateways that is 11 AC and 1.7 gigs, the AC2200, it's certified as Wave 2 compliant. So that means it provides the best, most robust service within the gateway. Now, if you have a different gateway and it's not Wave 2 compliant, you're probably not going to see those types of performance on the Wi-Fi side. So regardless of your internet connection, there may be some bottlenecks between the Wi-Fi. So that's a very good question. Another great question. We have a question from Shane. He says, what scanner do guests use to scan the QR code? Right. So anything that's available on your phones, as long as it allows your phone's camera to look at the code, scan it, it should be fine. It could be a free one or a fancier paid version. It should be fine.
I have a couple questions for you, Patrick.
All right.
What is the highest level of Wi-Fi security in the Zyzol router?
So the highest level for wireless security right now is the WPA2 PSK. That's the highest form that we can use. It's pretty secure. There is a new one coming out, but it's not available, and we'll need to see towards the end of the year in 2019, what it's going to offer us. So right now, WPA2 PSK is the highest level.
Another question is, how many guest networks can be created from a router?
A wireless router can support up to 8 guest networks, or 8 networks total. So usually 2 of the networks are utilized, which means there's going to be one for the 5 gig and one for the 2.4 that are already reserved. And if you got 6 others that you can use for your guest networking.
Thank you. Does the Mocha router support the WAP 6804 with MultiPro?
Yes. So our EMG 6765 and WAP 7205 are Mocha-enabled products which support coax networking through the home, repurposing the existing wiring. So those products will have support for MultiPro. And you can only use those products together to do the MultiPro. So if we're going to use, say, like a WAP 6804 with a EMG 6765, it's not going to be supported under MultiPro. If you don't use MultiPro in a non-MultiPro environment, then you can connect them as an industry standard Wi-Fi and repeater setup.
With Wi-Fi scheduling, can you control all Wi-Fi devices or individual devices?
That's a great question. So the Wi-Fi scheduler controls all the wireless clients that are connected. So to do an individual, it'd be a better option to utilize the MultiPro in the MultiPro app, where you can dial down into individual wireless clients and control their schedule and create a rule for those individual products.
Another question is, can each Wi-Fi SSID have their own Wi-Fi security settings?
Yes. So each of those wireless environments can have their own wireless settings. So even though they're coming from one gateway or one AP, each wireless guest network or wireless work group can have their own individual settings and their own individual wireless configuration.
Last question is it important to use the advanced Wi-Fi settings, or can we just leave those settings alone?
That's a great question too. So in the event that you're really having some issues with Wi-Fi and the deployment, you can toggle through those advanced wireless settings to fine-tune your environment. I think the most applicable one would be the transmit power, because you can change the level of how much it outputs. By default, it's 100%. And most of our products have high-powered Wi-Fi, so they're really providing good signal. But in some cases, you may need to cut that back in certain deployments. So that would probably be the only one that you really kind of rely on, other than the blocking, the intra-SSID blocking. All right. Excellent questions. We have some more updates here. So some solution updates coming through. We talked about our WAP 6804 in the past, and now we have the ability with MultiPro to turn that AP into a controller. So now you can use this just like you would in any kind of traditional mesh, you see in the retails, and connect it to any existing Wi-Fi router. So if you really need higher performing Wi-Fi and you want to control other APs or other clients or take advantage of MultiPro, then you can utilize the WAP 6804. We'll have embedded software that allows it to turn it into a controller and take that existing gateway, doesn't matter if even if it's a competing product, and provide the ability of MultiPro. Also, we talked about the Mocha products. So we are going to enable MultiPro on the EMG 6765 and WAP 7205. So the Mocha products will have the ability of MultiPro with these particular products. Again, MultiPro, when you use the Mocha, it's only for the Mocha devices. So if you have another device like a WAP 6804 or something else, it's only going to work with the Mocha products with the MultiPro option. So we have some updates for our evaluation program. In the past, we've always utilized, and most of you have probably seen, the evaluation form. You fill that out and you turn it into your distributor partner or your Zyxel sales representative. So we've made some changes and we've gone electronic. And we've taken the same form and we put it into electronic format to make it easier to fill out these evaluations. So what you do is you go to our website, Zyxel.com/USEN, go to training, support and training, go to the support page, and then go to the product evaluation orders. From there, you're going to go to the main page, and this is the first step. Go ahead and select your distributing partner, whoever it is, and their rep with their information. Then fill out your information. Then we'll select the products that we want to evaluate. How many? 1, 2, from the list here. And there's obviously, you see multiple products. Then if you need some extra settings or setup, say like you want to put a modem in bridge mode, or you need 35 or 035 VPI, VCI, you can go ahead and put some specific instructions in there, and then put the validation, and then submit it, and you're done. And we'll contact you about your evaluation. We also have a Zyxel Home app. So you're saying, okay, what is that? So the Zyxel Home app allows you to get product information quickly and easily on your mobile device. And in the instances where maybe the salesperson is not available or it's after hours and you kind of need some information, you can get it. So by downloading this app, it gives you connection to our solution guide with all the information, the specs that you can see on the latest products, our product portfolio, which with additional products, the MultiPro, also available as well. And then you get information where to buy if you're not sure who's your distribution partner, and then you can look at this list and have a contact. So if you're on Apple iOS, you have some installation instructions. So to stay up to date, type in Zyxel-digital.com in your browser. Tap on the share icon, and that'll add to your home screen. And so that way you can just click right into it and get that information whenever you need it. If you're on the Android platform, go to the Google Store and you can download it, look for Zyxel. You can look for Zyxel Home, Zyxel App.America, and you'll go ahead and click on it. It's a free app, and you can load it to your phone or your mobile device. Make sure to stay in touch with us, and we'd love to hear from you from our social media outlets. Please take the time if you have some questions or you want to talk about Zyxel. And I believe that's it.
If anyone else has any more questions, you can feel free to email me directly at wesley.chen, W-E-S-L-E-Y, period, C-H-E-N, at Zyxel.com. If you have any problems locating the recording, it will be uploaded onto the Zyxel website under our webinar tab, and we'd be more than happy to assist you if you have trouble locating it. Patrick and I would like to personally thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules for attending today's webinar. We hope to see you all again here at our next Zyxel webinar, which is next month. So stay tuned. Thank you so much.